Blake is
I
back.
have finally made an appearance back on the podcast. We took a little sabbatical. I was getting overworked, overwhelmed, all the topics, all the ideas for the podcast. So Mr. Blake Hejete is back on the pod officially.
He's here.
And the reason why is because we kicked Charlie off.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Blake will be a frequent flyer now.
Yes.
On the pod. So you are here to stay. What happened this morning?
Sky rockets in flight. Afternoon delight. Good old friend Elon Musk launched his Starship into, not quite into orbit.
I was going to say, barely.
I think it went like 2.5 minutes and then just blew into smithereens, but it at least left the launch pad. And for those of you that don't understand what actually happened today, so the Starship rocket that SpaceX has created is the vehicle that will be getting us to Mars. I think it's going to happen.
Humans on it, right?
Eventually. Right now they're in the huge testing phase. I believe they intentionally blew it up today when it wasn't going the trajectory that they wanted it to. So for those of you that know a little bit about rockets, SpaceX has been launching Falcon 9 rockets for probably 4-ish years now, and that's to get satellites into space for their, satellite stuff. They're just testing and testing and testing and testing. Those rockets actually land themselves on like a 10 by 10 foot little thing floating in the ocean. So for those of you that don't think autonomous cars is coming, they're landing rockets in the ocean on little concrete pads. So.
Which is, I've watched a video of one doing it. I'm just like, what the hell?
Like the first time that happened, I was like, wait, what just happened?
Yeah.
So those Falcon 9 rockets, why they're called Falcon 9s is they've got 9 Raptor engines on them, which are like the booster jets to make things easy.
That shit's crazy.
The Starship has 39 Raptor engines.
Oh my.
So that's 4 times the amount, roughly.
Yeah.
4 times the amount of like fuel. So I heard this morning on the broadcast. 10 million pounds of fuel. 10 million pounds.
In the rocket?
In the rocket, because it's compressed. So think of a propane tank. So like when you lift a full propane tank, it's like 60 pounds. And then when it's empty, it's like,
That's crazy.
Isn't that crazy? Like it's heavier, the gas, like,
how much
like that was the easiest way to think of it as like a propane tank because like, oh, I'm going to take my propane tank to fill it up and you fill it up and you're like, oh shit, that's heavy.
Yeah. Because, there's no room for 10 million pounds of, like, liquid gas. So it's just, like, compressed.
Yeah, compressed gases.
Do you know how much that cost?
I don't know, because they just, like, blew that thing to smithereens today.
Billions.
Probably.
Which is just crazy.
So I know that wasn't supposed to be one of our topics, but I was like, I got to start
the
pod with a bang because the rocket ship exploded today.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny because I laid in bed and turned it on for Aria, and Aria might be a special guest on our podcast today.
I'll keep an eye out.
And I told her, I was like, someday you're going to have the option to go to Mars on one of these things.
It's crazy to
Just
think.
like she won't learn how to drive because of Elon Musk.
Yeah, you're very...
And I'm sticking to that. She will not take driver's ed at 14. So think of in 10 years, I think autonomous driving will be here. Elon keeps telling us for 8 years in a row now that full self-driving will launch. And I think the reason why it hasn't launched is government regulation.
100%.
I think the technology's there.
Well, I also think that like for that to be for the full self-driving to be like regulated and like legal, I think every vehicle on the road has to be like fully self-drivable. Because like when Teslas get in wrecks, it's not with other Teslas usually it's with human drivers.
The fault is not on the car.
Yeah, not necessarily.
Most of the time.
But it's like, all right, well, if you have 2 Teslas, like they're never gonna, because they're like
they have force fields around them.
Yeah. Or did you see that? Sorry, really quick side topic. There's this road somewhere in Europe. I can't remember exactly. Sweden or something. No, but it has it when you drive on it, it charges your car. It's like magnetically charged.
No way.
Yeah, I could find the story. I just saw it, the headline. I thought that was interesting though.
That's really fascinating to me.
But talking about electric vehicles,
because that's the biggest problem is like electric vehicles is like the battery power. I think like. There's a luxury thing to it, but then there's also a lack of luxury to Teslas and electric vehicles. But then there's also the battery charging capability. Like you're not gonna have a Tesla and take it on a road trip for a 5-hour drive.
Yeah,
I don't want to stop and charge for an hour.
It'd be a 7-hour drive.
That's exactly why I don't own a Tesla. In a weird way, you know?
If I owned a Tesla, though,
Not if, when.
when I own a Tesla, granted, maybe for the first year or two, that will be my only car. But when I'm financially there, I would love to have a second driver as well.
Right.
You know, if it's like, all right, going on a road trip, let's hop in the.
You know what's funny is you say that, and then how often do you ever actually like road trip?
I don't.
Wherever you drive your car, where you really need to go for like 300 miles without stopping somewhere to charge, like
Very
so minimal.
rarely.
So like think of like the whole psychology of like road tripping changing to where like you go rent a car for a road trip.
That's what my parents do.
Yeah.
That's what my dad does.
Really?
Through Costco.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
We
Rent a car through Costco. Didn't know Costco offered that.
Yeah, my dad rents a car through Costco. We drove to Lake Havasu one time, so that was like a 14-hour drive. Returned it in a week, and
Renting cars through Costco, man, they just sell everything, don't they?
that was pre-COVID, so they're a lot cheaper. But yeah, dude, Costco does everything.
Speaking of Tesla, let's get to our first topic of the
First
day.
topic of the pod.
Whew, we've been heating it up, warming up the tables. Blake's excited to be back in the pod. I love it.
I'm hyped.
They reported earnings yesterday, and they missed their revenue numbers.
The revenue is down 19%.
Exactly.
19.3.
Yep.
So.
And earnings, their revenue was down year over year, 19.3%.
Yep.
And what that says to me is a few things. One thing I take away from the earnings report that came out is consumer excitement and adoption slowing potentially? Because there's this like push and pull with like development of the new vehicles. There's this push and pull with market conditions. Are we in a recession right now? Are people not spending as much money? There's also a push and pull with them dropping prices recently.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
Well,
because they've dropped prices, what? Two times now, 3 times.
No, it was like 6 times over the last year. Granted, some of them were only like $300.
Right.
But those were still price drops. So I think it was like 5 or 6 times over the last like 2 years, and it like showed the breakdown. So it was like totaling over the course of 2 years, they totally lowered the price by $7,000 total over the course of 2 years. I think so. Like, let's just pretend I'm a consumer that wants to buy a Tesla. The reason I don't have a Tesla right now, they are a little bit pricey for like an entry level, like for a first vehicle or someone that's not, in their middle-aged person with like good savings or whatever. Like, they are a little pricey. Skepticism, is this thing going to catch on fire? Because when you see the three news articles, it's like Tesla caught on fire. Like, you only believe that. You don't look at the.
So you're a little skeptical about that? Like, you think the car might blow up versus a gas car?
I'm not skeptical on it, but it's like you only see that in the news, so that's only what you know. But it's like, but then I'm like, okay, I see all these Teslas every day.
The media is manipulated.
Yeah, exactly. But I see like all these Teslas every day, and I'm like, all right, they're fine. Like, people drive these. People literally own these. I know people that buy these cars and drive them every day. But also, I'm like, and this doesn't like deter me from buying one, but like they're like really heavy cars, like
tax write-off,
a lot heavier. True. But I'm just like, there's so much efficiency that they still have to get to with like production of the batteries, disposing of the batteries.
I hear you on
charging the like, because in my head I'm like, all right, after 6 years of your, like, when does that battery just start like not charging the same?
We haven't
phone.
We haven't seen the life cycle of like how long a battery vehicle lasts.
Because Teslas have been around for like what?
5 to 10 years ish.
10 years maybe max.
Yeah,
which is not long at all for anything.
Yeah, you look at a gas car, like 5 to 10 years, it should be kicking. Yeah. Everything should be working still.
Well, I look at Teslas and I'm like, these all look new. Like, where's the old ones? Yeah. Like, I don't see the old one. And maybe they just hold. They don't look old because like they didn't do a ton of innovation on like the design.
Right.
So maybe I'm looking at one that's 8 years old, but it doesn't look like that.
Right. And I think there's some simplicity to the design as well that they thought of when they first launched. They're like, okay, well, we can make mods as it grows, but we don't want to change too much that you can notice a big difference.
Yeah.
They
have changed the design most on the Model Y.
Yep.
Now, don't quote me on this, but just from seeing them.
The Y looks like the S. Or no, the X.
Now
looks
it
just
does.
like it.
It used to be like super like tall.
Yeah.
The body was like, it was like really ugly.
Bulbous.
Yeah. And now they're a lot more sleek.
Looked like a tit driving down the road.
Yeah. They look like the X and the 3. Obviously, that's like, it's a crossover.
Yeah.
But like, sometimes I look at them like, oh, that's a 3. And then sometimes I look at them like, oh, that's an X. I'm like, no, that's a Y.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I
they
get them
look-
confused now. Big time.
Also, the reason that I'd want an X over the Y, and this is completely just as a like and not like a functionality thing. Yes, but also the windshield goes all the way.
Yes.
The Y is like a normal car, has the visor brake and then the sunroof. And I'm just like, oh, just that little detail.
Just the glass all the way up.
But can't be too picky.
Just like DJ Khaled. All the way up.
But yeah, I think that's the main thing with Teslas is like skepticism across consumers. Like, because like I said, someone sees one news article and they're like, mine's gonna blow up.
Right.
Yeah. So EVs, I think they're gonna be. A part
So
of the
do you
future.
think what happens with Tesla? The stock price like tanked today, 10%, because people think that consumer demand is slowing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's just like an investor skepticism, and then it's like, all right, well, in the future. Like, that's just from an investor standpoint, but it's like,
Right.
just because it's slowing doesn't mean like they're going away.
I bought a lot of Tesla today.
Yeah,
Because I believe in Elon.
Yeah, I
I
don't.
love him.
I don't own any Tesla currently, but
All he owns is gold. Because I'm an old man and I own gold. Blake's singing on the podcast today.
gold and real estate. I don't own real estate, but
Yeah, we'll see what happens with Tesla. I think that there's just a lot of underlying. Everybody that I know that has a Tesla freaking loves it.
exactly. Yeah,
Loves it. And they say they look past the luxuries of it and they look past the charging inefficiencies because they love the vehicle so much. And I'm like,
also, you
it's
pull
hard
in your
to beat.
garage at night, plug it in, you don't think about it, you wake up, it's full. Like,
Yeah.
But going back to like the road trip stuff, when I drove one in Vegas, and it was like 250 miles, and then I would drive 10 miles, and then it was like 170.
Yeah, the
I'm like,
mile like
maybe I'm just gunning
stuff is bad. But you know what's interesting to me too? My brother-in-law just bought a Y and they freaking love it. Like they're like, this is the greatest car. And he's like, it's taken a few weeks to get used to it, but now I like love it. And I love how it drives and what
Yeah.
it does and like its quickness and things like that. But he said that they've ran it super low on the battery before. And I think that what they like, due to regulation, those cars are impossible to move off the road if they die. Like if you run out of battery on a road trip,
Okay, so remember when everyone got stuck in Tahoe 2 winters ago?
yes.
There was like a couple Teslas there. They all died. And these cars
they're
are
heavy as
so
hell, too.
heavy. I'm like, shit.
So what I think the way that they're programmed is that they have an additional 10% battery to at least get them there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to flag you just because I feel like from like a regulatory standpoint, they're like, all right, you can't give them the true mileage.
Yeah.
Just like in your car,
Oh,
it's like
100%.
when it's on E, you could still run another 50 miles.
My
you
gas
know?
light's on. I'm like, I need to get gas. I'm like, honestly, I could probably drive for another week.
Yeah, you probably could. So, okay, we'll wrap up our Tesla talks. We got some other good topics today to talk about. Let's pivot to a little bit of real estate, commercial real estate stuff. Lots of people are in the interpretation that we're in a recession right now. I think a lot has changed since this banking crisis thing
Yeah.
there hasn't been much talk about, this looming crazy recession. Like, I feel like it kind of just got swept under the rug. Like, have you heard anything recently on the banking stuff?
No, I've seen a lot of surprising optimism,
Same.
like after. And I think maybe because like it happened and it's like, oh, it's not that bad. Also, like I saw this meme and it was like, the U.S. is in $31 trillion of debt and they want to give me a credit score, like stuff, shit like that. And I'm just like, yeah, like, I mean,
How does that work?
the way our system designed, like it like crashes, does really good, but it's just
we'll
that's just how it
default on our
goes.
debt eventually. It's like they can't just keep printing, you know?
mean-
They get mad at us for having credit card debt.
I'm like, dude, also credit card fees right now are like 40+%.
Oh, geez, I haven't even looked because I always pay mine off.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I didn't know, but because when the Fed raises rates, it also affects
Everything. Yep. Yep.
money that you're buying.
I think what the Fed's doing right now, they've raised interest rates to a point that they finally broke something, and that's the banking shit that they're kind of sweeping under the rug. And I think they're trying to patch that up right now so they can raise a couple more times this year to really combat inflation. And I mean, we got ourselves into this mess So we got to figure out a way to get out of it before it gets 10 times worse, because inflation will wreak havoc. Because if the price of goods increases more than like what services and goods we can create, like it's just detrimental to society and our economy. Like it's going nowhere.
Yeah, there's just so much with like foreign affairs and stuff right now where it's like we're getting
reamed. Dollar got like depegged or like dropped off.
Yeah, everyone's like not using it anymore.
Yen
or
whatever.
It's just like shit, you know?
So
what do you do?
I think the next shoe to fall potentially, and I was listening to a CNBC interview a couple days ago from a commercial real estate developer, that there's roughly $1.5 trillion worth of commercial real estate debt that is maturing by the year of 2025. So the next 3 years. So for those of you that don't understand commercial real estate loans, it's very different than your standard house loan. You know, you've got a 25-year amortization schedule. Maybe the loan is due in 30 years or vice versa. So in your eyes, you're like, okay, well, I can have this mortgage for 30 years without having to touch it or do anything to it. Commercial real estate, you've got different options. You've got balloon payments, which means the loan is due, that balance is due at a certain point in time, either 5, 10, 15 years. Sometimes they'll do 20 years on a really stabilized asset, but you hardly see 20-year amortizations.
And this is leasing or buying? Or
this is for
loans?
when you're buying a commercial real estate asset. So usually you'll have 5, 10, and 15 years. Why they don't do a 30-year or a 25-year balloon payment, or like the loan matures at that time, is because there's so much up and down in the market, and there's so much up and down within these assets because they're income generating. It's not like a house. Like if you've had this job for 7 years, they can project that you're going to at least make this income plus more over the next 30 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the stabilization of a commercial real estate asset, you might lose 2 tenants and the income of that plummets in a recession.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot more variability in that. So what's really interesting about this is all of the commercial real estate loans that were placed into service in the last 5 years had low interest rates. 2.5 to 5.5 is kind of what you saw. Like I heard of someone that got a 3.2 on like a commercial real estate loan. They did put they put like 60% down. So their LTV was like 40%. So
what is that acronym?
Loan to value.
Okay.
So when you buy a commercial real estate asset, you want to make like they require you to have at least a minimum of 20 to 30%. If it's an owner occupied, 10 to 15% down on the asset. So that's your value that you're putting in versus the loan amount that they're giving you.
Gotcha.
So, so where this gets interesting in my eyes is all of these loans are maturing in the next 3 years. That's $1.5 trillion.
Which means like they will be paid off?
They have to be paid off. So what how can you go pay off a $5 million loan? You get a new loan with a new 5-year like a balloon payment, and you have to pay off that existing loan.
That's crazy.
So in commercial real estate, you're constantly like, if you don't understand finance, you're probably not in commercial real estate, because there's so many overlaying metrics that you have to understand what you're doing, like with your capital that's coming in. Like, are you paying down your loan? Are you deploying it elsewhere?
Yeah.
But with these coming due, there's a lot of people that have these low interest rates, and with asset values decreasing, when that person goes and needs to get a new loan to pay off the old loan, and they're not getting the value that once was 2 years ago when it was trading at, let's just say it was $5 million, and now the asset's only worth $4 million, but their loan balance was like 3-ish, you know? So all of a sudden they've got to come up with this equity. A lot of people don't have a ton of cash just sitting around. Yeah. So creative finance will come into play, where some of these banks are going, oh, well, we'll give you this much money at this rate and this much money at this rate, and we're going to do like a blended 7-year rate. So they're going to have to get really creative.
Interesting.
On the loan maturing. I know this is a little like high level for you because you haven't spent a ton of time learning it, but
it makes sense though.
It's just, if you think of like when a loan comes due, commercial real estate is 5 to 10 years, usually.
I have something to say though when you're done.
Okay. But it's just fascinating to me, like what's going to happen, like where are we going to cover up these potential coming issues?
Like the
gaps of equity that are going to need to be resolved.
Yeah. That is interesting, because that makes sense.
Does that make sense?
It's worth $5 million when you take out the loan. Your loan's $3 million. Then it's worth $4 million, and you need what?
and you've got to pay off the $3 million loan, but you can only get
2.5.
2.5.
Yeah.
So there's your $500,000 that you have to inject into a deal midway through buying. Like that's what gets scary. And this is talking big scale, like, $100 million projects in San Francisco that all of a sudden they got in and they're, that spread is like 30 mil.
Yeah.
Like it was worth 100. Now it's worth 70. And now they've got to come up with this gap to clear up these balances. This is where I think some issue arises when you're talking $2, $3, $4 million properties with loans maturing. Usually the depreciation in the last few years won't completely wreak havoc, but we're talking like big numbers, like $1.5 trillion worth of loans maturing. So we've got to figure out to find some money to pay those off.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Money's fake, in my opinion.
It is. Yeah, buy Bitcoin.
So interesting thing. My grandpa's doing an owner carry on a property that he bought probably 8-10 years ago.
Okay. How long is the loan?
30 years, 6%. Wow. Can't pay it off early. The dude.
Oh, he can't pay it off early. Okay.
So my grandpa's just like that.
See, well, and that's smart. So some people that own commercial real estate, he's providing himself fixed income for 30 years.
Exactly.
He's being the bank.
Yeah.
It's smart to do that.
That's what I was going to say. I feel like that's just owner carries aren't incredibly common, but correct? Incredibly common.
The only way that you can kind of do it, because most loan documents say that you can't go sell the property and still keep the loan. So usually it happens only when you own the property outright, but some people will pay it down to then owner carry sell it to then liquefy that property quickly.
Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. So one of the tenants that moved in, it's a strip mall type thing in Emmett. And one of the tenants moved in and wanted to buy the building. And so he came to that agreement with my grandpa. So he pays my grandpa the premium every month for 30 years. And yeah, can't pay it off early. I thought that was just interesting because you were saying, they're like 20 years max.
Right.
On a normal.
Yeah. And owner carries, this is the thing I freaking love about commercial real estate. If you study finance and your personal finance needs and wants, there's so much creativity in this commercial real estate space. 30 years, he could have done a 21-year because he gets to choose. He's the bank in this situation. And that's you get excited about that because it's not fixed income, but it's fixed income, you know? And then the best benefit of owner carries, let's say that guy goes out of business or he wants to walk and he can't make his loan payment anymore. What does your grandpa get? He gets the fucking whole building back. It's what's the worst case scenario? He's owned it for how many years already?
Yeah, and then he's got to go.
Yep.
Get a
I would love the stat to see how often owner carries default back to the owners. We got to look that up. You know what I mean?
It's a pretty solid tenant, but you
just never know. I mean things change in people's lives, especially when a tenant operating in a business like that. 90% of businesses fail.
Yeah.
Nature of the beast.
Yep.
So anything could wreak havoc and potentially disrupt that 30-year payment. Now there's probably an assignment clause in that contract that gives the tenant the ability to assign the business over to a new owner that has good financials that can make that payment.
True. Yeah. My grandpa's very
he's savvy
until
he keeps buying gold, not buying Bitcoin.
He's savvy and gets the right people involved. Attorney, he pays for all of the super. What am I trying to say?
Top tier.
Make sure everything's solid and dialed.
That's the one thing I notice in this business too is not enough people have the patience to really spend the time. Contracts are legit contracts.
Yeah.
And yes, there are some ways you can get out of them sometimes, but a good patient commercial real estate owner is your worst nightmare when it comes to contracts because they protect the hell out of themselves.
They read that
shit? Yeah. You're like, whoa, damn.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of interesting.
They're important.
What do you think? Do you think commercial real estate will be the next shoe to fall, or do you think we'll be able to ride this thing out? I don't think we're going to have a soft landing anymore.
I just see so many people we're defaulting, we're out of money. It's okay, whatever happens to them, nothing. They file for bankruptcy and they get
yeah. How does a country file for bankruptcy?
Yeah, there's just so many ways that it's not really the end of the world.
Right.
It's just fuck, this is a headache now for the next couple of years.
I love it. Yeah. Well, we're gonna cut the podcast short today.
Cut it.
We're gonna talk about ChatGPT and AI and what's happening next week on the pod because.
A little crazy.
It's editing our videos.
We're gonna fire Charlie.